Welcome, everyone. This is the latest edition of the Shooting It Straight podcast with Justin Jackson. I am producer John. We are so excited to be with you tonight on a Monday night to talk about some UNC basketball. And what a great game we have to talk about tonight. That was an awesome college basketball game on Friday. Did not end the way that UNC wanted it to end. The title of tonight's show, First Test Complete. The test was not passed because UNC lost to Kansas, but it was a great test for this UNC basketball team, and we are going to talk all about it tonight. We are also live here on YouTube. We've got a bunch of comments already, so we're going to do something a little bit different tonight with the chat. So chat, let us know where you're watching from tonight. Let us know where you're tuning in from, and we'll get some responses here. We'll maybe throw a few up on the board. I know Justin is in Tennessee and I'm in North Carolina, so let's see where else our viewers are from. I also want to take a quick second and shout out our sponsors for this episode and all of Inside Carolina's podcasts. I want to give a quick shout out to Congruity HR and a quick shout out to Johnny T-Shirt. Thank you for supporting them because they do such an amazing job of supporting Inside Carolina and all the work that we do. Justin, how's it going? And what are your reflections, thoughts now that you've had a little bit of time to think about it, the UNC-Kansas game?
Yeah, man, we missed you on the post-game show. For everybody that was a part of that, appreciate y'all tuning in. I'm good, man. I really have no complaints, me personally. Um, and honestly, I don't think there's too many complaints that should be had when it comes to UNC either. That was a game that had the atmosphere of a championship level game. Obviously, the number one team in the country. You know, they're the number one team for a reason, and the fact that North Carolina had a chance down the stretch to win the game after the way the game started. Uh, I think it's something that you can walk away from that game. Obviously, you always want to win, but you can walk away from that game pretty happy, especially with the effort that we saw in the second half, the adjustments, guys kind of settling in a little bit. So, we'll get into it a little bit, but I walk away from that Kansas game saying, you know what, this is a game that's going to help them in the long run, even with the L in the win-loss column. So, super excited for this episode, man.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the lessons learned from that game. I think in the first half there were a few danger zone moments for me as an outside observer, kind of watching the players' body language and things like that. When you play possibly what might be the toughest game of the season in the second game of the season, that's a very dangerous spot because on the one hand, it can help you build confidence if you play well, but on the other side, the other side of that coin, in the first half, I was a little nervous that this could really hurt this team's confidence because all of the narratives, all the concerns that we had before the season about the team's lack of size, the imbalance of the roster, they really showed up in the first half of that game. Yet UNC did bounce back. They were able to gain a lot of confidence, a lot of lessons learned from this game. Justin, as a player, as a former player yourself, how does confidence get built from a game like that? How do the players think about a loss where UNC played still well, but still it's a loss on the scoreboard?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you saw in that first half, I was talking with somebody. You saw the same thing when I tried to compare it to something. It was the same thing that I was a part of when we went to play in Indiana. Like I said, the atmosphere is incredibly loud. I mean, they would pan around the arena during the game, and I mean that the student sections, the fans, they were going crazy the entire time. So you go into your first away game of the season is in one of the most, if not the most, hostile environments. You have the number one team in the country with a ton of, obviously they had a ton of hype and super excited for that game as well. I think what you saw in that first half was just nerves and jitters and they just kind of had to settle in a little bit. I think there were some things as far as X and O's that kind of changed in the second half, but a lot of it was just kind of getting comfortable. And it's hard going into a place like that when you can't really, it's hard to remember, you know, what the matchups are. It's so loud and it's so um, just a tough spot to be in. So I think that's kind of what you saw was just kind of settling in as the game went on. Like you said, I mean, it gets to points in games where it's kind of a make or break type of situation. But at the same time, the game is basketball is just full of runs. I mean, that's literally the game of basketball. And so I think as the second half went on, I think that's kind of where you saw guys just kind of get, kind of back into who they are, run what they do. Guys just making plays how they always make plays. So I think for me, when I see this type of game, I think for one, you can take the fact that they played so bad in the first half and they still had a chance at the end of the game to win. You can walk away very confident in knowing, hey, if we just played a little bit better to start that game, I think we have that one. For two, RJ had one of the worst games that I've seen him have, which is unfortunate, but at the same time, bad games happen. So throughout the season, there might be another game where RJ struggles. And so to walk away from a game like that, knowing that your leader and best player struggled and you still had a chance once again down the stretch, that should also give you a lot of confidence. And then I think this game just builds confidence for the rest of the season, knowing, hey, we went up against the best team in the country at their home, second game of the year. Like you said, a brand new team still trying to, gel and figure each other out. And we almost had a chance to win down the stretch. And obviously, like I said, as competitors and players, you want to win every game. It's just how it is. But when you really take a step back and look at everything involved, I think those are kind of the reasons you can walk away with confidence.
I think too the fact that this is such an experienced UNC basketball team, there's a lot of new faces, but there's a lot of returners, a lot of veterans, guys who know how to play with each other. When you're in the huddle and it's so loud in Allen Fieldhouse and you're kind of looking around at each other, the guys kind of knew that they would have each other's back and be able to crawl back into the game. I want to bring a few stats in here because it really shows just how stark of a difference it was in the first and the second half. North Carolina trailed by 20 points in the first half at 2 different points, but the Tar Heels rallied to take a 4-point lead at 87-83. It was the first time UNC took the lead in a game in which it trailed by at least 20 since a 2-point loss to Georgia Tech in the Smith Center in 2010. So that shows that's a long time ago. This sort of comeback does not happen often. I think, of course, with the UNC-Kansas matchup, a lot of people were thinking about the national championship game as well from a few seasons ago. We talked about the box score a little bit there with the fact that UNC was down 53-38 in the first half. They ended up winning the second half 51-39. We've already gotten a question about this, Justin, so I wanted to bring this question in a little bit early on in the show. This question is from Melinda Dolphin, and I'll show this real quick and then I'll bring it back down. What adjustments did UNC make in the second half that were the most effective in turning the game around? What did you see as the difference between the first and second halves, Justin?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I kind of felt was once again, like I said, everybody just kind of settling in. I think that's the first step that you kind of saw. Okay, now we can kind of take a breath. We can get into what we want to run. We can make plays. It only takes a few plays for a team to realize, hey, we can play with these guys and we can beat these guys. And I think that's kind of what you saw kind of as that second half kind of started. But I mean, as far as X's and O's, and I think you have a few pictures or kind of examples of kind of what I'm about to talk about. But I think a lot of the second half, you just saw a lot more of the 5-out open, high pick and rolls, just kind of the spacing where there's a bunch of space for these guards, which once again I think is the biggest strength of this team, being able to get downhill and make plays for others. You saw a bunch of times, whether it was Elliott, RJ, Seth, coming off a pick and roll and either being able to get downhill, having drop offs, kickouts from the defense collapsing. So it seemed like they just kind of got back to kind of what they have been doing and what we've talked about so much with, the what people would consider the lack of size inside, kind of how they have to play offensively. So you see guards being able to get, having better driving lanes and being able to get downhill and play make, I think was a big one. It felt like there towards the end of the game, they had 4 or 5 possessions in a row where they were just shooting layups at the rim. And a lot of that was from the spacing and whether it was from bringing Hunter Dickinson out or just having that type of space and be able to make plays, I think was huge for them. And then a lot of it too, defensively, I think in the first half, there was a lot of their bad offense led to a lot of transition opportunities for Kansas. And I think offense and defense are always correlated, but whenever you take bad shots and you get bad looks or turnovers and they're able to get out in transition, it's a way harder game. And I think in the second half, you saw them being able to run better offense, get better shots, even if they missed. Their defense was kind of set up to be able to, defend the transition a little bit better as opposed to maybe a live ball turnover or a bad shot that ricochets off and kind of pushes Kansas into a transition opportunity. So I think those are kind of the things that you saw. And then too, a big thing that, not many people have talked about was them being able to get to the free throw line.
Mm-hmm.
North Carolina, it felt like they lived at the free throw line, which sometimes in those type of games, whenever maybe in the first half you don't really have it going, just being able to go to the line, stop the clock, stop the momentum, step in there, make a couple free throws, and now you can get back on defense and kind of get set up. I think that was a big key, even whenever they weren't playing their best in the first half, still being able to get to the free throw line. So, like I said, there's a lot of positives that you can take away from this, and I think hopefully they can and kind of carry it over into the season.
Yeah, I totally agree about the free throws. A stat on the free throws, North Carolina made 28 of 31 free throws. That's a percentage of over 90%. That was the fifth best free throw percentage in UNC history in a game it attempted 30 or more free throws, and it was the highest ever in a road game. And one more stat too on the free throws. It was who was getting to the line for me that really stood out. RJ Davis, 9 of 11 from the free throw line. Seth was 10 of 10 from the free throw line, and EC was 6 of 6. So all of UNC's guards were the ones who were getting to the line, and that's from just relentlessly attacking the basket. I really like the point you made there, Justin, about defense leading to offense. There's an old basketball rule, a missed layup on one end immediately leads to a made layup on the other end. And I think you kind of saw a little bit of an extension of that in this game. In the first half, Kansas was so locked in offensively. UNC was trying to push the pace, but it's hard to push the pace when you're taking the ball underneath your basket after a made shot. But in the second half, UNC got a little bit more stops, a few more stops. They were able to play with a little bit of a quicker pace. Something that really stood out to me as well. Every single time UNC had a chance to attack in transition or semi-transition, they did it. And it was not always pretty. Elliott had some rough takes into the basket where he kind of, got a free throw call. Seth, same thing. But they are good enough athletes. They're good enough around the rim to finish some of those shots or at minimum draw a foul. And when your half court offense is what it is, and when you're playing a really good defense like Kansas, you absolutely have to take advantage of those opportunities to push the ball and really attack. I know it's a big talking point for Hubert. You can see him at times on the sidelines, kind of waving his arm, telling his guys to go. Those semi-transition opportunities, Justin, kind of explain that to the viewers, the importance of attacking the basket there against not a set defense.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I guess, for those that might not kind of know what semi-transition is, it's, like you said, it's transition is just basically getting out, getting a layup most of the time, or having some sort of situation where you're in the front court with some sort of advantage, whether it's 3-on-2, 2-on-1, whatever it might be. But a lot of times you kind of see, you might push it out, and then they might do a decent job of getting back and kind of covering up. But without pulling it out back to the half court, kind of getting into a quick action, whether that's high pick and roll from the trail big that's coming in, or just some sort of drive kick action that, with this team, it's pretty easy to get to with the way that the guards are able to get downhill. So um, I think those, like you said, those are huge opportunities in a game like this where you're struggling, where your best player's struggling. Half court is tough because they've got a ton of momentum, and defensively, it's always easier whenever you have the momentum. Those are important situations to get to the free throw line, get out in transition, or kind of like you said, the semi-transition situations where maybe you have a little bit of an advantage and you can take advantage of that. So, even through the bad first half, I think there's still things like that they can take into other games. There's going to be, the way basketball is, there's going to be other games where RJ doesn't have a good game, or Elliot's struggling, or Seth isn't able to get downhill the way that he was able to against Kansas. And you got to find ways to win some of those games. And I think getting to the free throw line and trying to get out in transition as much as possible is going to be key for this team.
Absolutely. You referenced it earlier. Some of the things that UNC did do well in the half court in the second half was really spacing it out. So let's take this opportunity to run through this for our viewers. So for those of us watching on YouTube, you'll see a few screenshots here. For those of us listening on podcast, I'm going to do my very best to kind of narrate what we're looking at here. And these are screenshots as well. So if you're clicking on your screen wondering why the video isn't playing, it's just a static image here. So this is a frame from the second half. UNC has all three of their guards on the floor, the big three, if you will, RJ, Elliot, and Seth. And then the two bigs, if you will, the other two players on the court are Drake and Jae'Lyn Withers. So in this frame, RJ is bringing it up the court. I'm going to move it to frame number 2, and then Justin, just let me know, what are you seeing from just a simple action here that UNC is running?
Yeah, so I think that's kind of what we were talking about, the semi-transition. It's 22 on the clock in the second frame, on the shot clock, which means this was straight out of whether it was a made basket or a rebound on the other end. And it's just a simple 5-out spacing. And in this situation, we talk about them going small. So Jay Witt is at the 5 in this situation with Hunter Dickinson, so it can cause some matchup problems for Kansas. And so it's just a simple high pick and roll. And Jay Witt has, probably the option to either roll or to pop. And in this situation, I think maybe he had already hit 1 or 2 threes. So he decides to pop. And obviously, like you see in this frame, Hunter Dickinson with a true big, a lot of times they don't really know how to guard a pop, or, somebody that's setting a screen that has the ability to pop. And so in this situation, Hunter Dickinson stays on the ball and the guard continues to follow, and Jay Witt makes the right decision to pop. And, I think one thing we have to praise Jay Witt and how he played. I think there for a while, he was kind of who was keeping them in the game with the way that he was playing, knocking down shots, and then obviously taking the challenge on the other end, playing small against a guy like Hunter Dickinson. And so all the praise to him and how he played, and hopefully he can continue to play that way for them. But I think this is just what you saw a lot of. You just saw a bunch of kind of 5-out spacing, high pick and roll situations like that, that was able to get them back into the game and kind of get some momentum on their side.
Yeah, absolutely. The play here finishes with a wing 3 there from Withers. He drains it. I absolutely agree about Jae'Lyn Withers. There's been some chatter on the internet, people pointing out his turnovers, or, still a little bit of maybe a hangover from last season, that one single shot that he took in the game against Alabama. This roster desperately needs someone like Jae'Lyn Withers. His shooting is absolutely critical. His length, his cutting, he can turn the ball over, X amount of time, 3 times, 4 times. He can take some bad shots. He has to be out on the court in the key moments when you look at this roster, he's going to be a big part of this team's success this season. So don't focus on the one or two bad turnovers, because he has some bad turnovers. But Elliott had some bad turnovers against Kansas as well. It happens. It's basketball. It's a really loud environment. There are a lot of people there right behind the court who are getting very loud and yelling and things like that. I want to point this out as well. Just the spacing that UNC has from even some non-shooters, potentially, right? Like coming into the season, you'd think, maybe Seth, he's not necessarily the best shooter. Maybe someone like Drake, his shot isn't necessarily proven, but there's a lot of space here on the court to operate. And this is also space where Seth can take advantage of it as a cutter. Same thing with Drake. All of this empty space. There's no one within the 3-point line here on the basket. So you get kind of the gravity as a shooter, but you also kind of get on the flip side a lot of room for a cutter. So UNC is kind of taking the traditional concept of playing with spacing and with shooters and twisting it a little bit, just because there's so much space on the floor. I'll advance one frame here back to the shot. I mean, this could be a shot here from Withers, or Drake could easily cut to the basket right here, and that's a dunk for him, given his length and his quick twitch athleticism. So I was really impressed with UNC's offense in the second half, the way they were attacking in transition, the way they were spacing the floor. Justin, we haven't talked about this much yet, but in some ways it's a little bit of a departure from the traditional secondary break that UNC loves to run so much, or loved perhaps in the past tense. I was looking at a few of the clips before the show of UNC's traditional secondary break sets. It's a lot of back screening. You'd see Kennedy posted up there on one of the blocks with an arm up, or things like that. So basketball is changing with the way that big men are playing, and UNC is definitely changing the way their roster is playing too. Whether that's a limitation of the people they have and the post-up threats they have, or whether that's just sort of Hubert Davis, trying to get back into this game and trying whatever he can to help UNC claw back into it. I thought that was an interesting point as well, because this is sort of the time when you would be running those secondary break plays so early in the shot clock.
Yeah, I mean, I think to go back to kind of, we'll rewind it a little bit and go back to kind of, Jay Witt. Um, I think there can be two things right at the same time. Was his turnover at the end of the game a big turnover? Yes, it was. But at the same time, he's basically who kept us in the game up until that point, right? So, there's obviously, I think, there's no hate with, especially with the way that he played. I think, me personally, I think that was the best game Jay Witt has had since he's been at UNC,
Mm-hmm.
and against the best team that that they've played, and probably, possibly would play all season. And so all the credit has to go to him in that situation. But I mean, I think, like you said, to your point, I think the biggest thing is his versatility. Him making shots, I think, is going to be good for the team, but I don't think that's necessarily what he has to be out there on the floor to do. I think Jay Witt having the ability to go small and play five with him to cause matchup problems, like we saw in that clip of him, picking and popping, or like you said, it could have been a jump shot, could have been a drive, and the spacing's so good. It's, for him, as good of an athlete as he is, he can get on the rim, in a quick second. So, but for him, it's staying out of foul trouble, not making necessarily the bonehead mistakes, and just using his versatility for this team is going to be super, super key. And you saw that in that first game, or in that game against Kansas. So I think that's big. I think also, kind of looking down the line, I mean, you saw the freshmen who we've talked about a lot, and I'm sure everybody has, been, wondering kind of how they would be used and how Coach Davis would, use them in the lineups and the rotations and stuff. And for me, when I watch them, I mean, Drake had an air ball at the end of the game, but the moment didn't seem too big for them. They came right into the game, and I think Drake's first possession, he drove and had a floater off the glass, and Ian had some big time shots, tough shots. while he was in and things like that. So I think for them, it's just a matter of kind of seeing as they mature and how the lineups kind of start to secure themselves. I think that's kind of what's going to be key. I think it's too early to really say, oh, Ian and Drake, they need to be playing 25 minutes a game, or coach needs to start, having them out there in the starting lineups or at the very end of the game. Um, but they show that they're, I would say that they're ready to play at this level. And, um, even through all the bumps and bruises and things like that, I think that they're definitely ready to contribute at some point. So that'll be exciting to kind of watch as the season goes on.
Ian really impressed me as well. 15 minutes for him, 4 of 5 from the field, 2 of 2 from the three-point line, which is so important for him. He finished with 10 points. I think too in the first half, there were some times in there where he was the offense. There wasn't a lot of positive momentum for UNC. He was not afraid, like you said. He has so much talent. He can create for himself. He can create for others. And that's one of the hardest things to do, is to really be able to create your own shot. And for him to do that in the second game of the season was really impressive. For me, I can kind of see him fitting in really nicely into that kind of role off the bench. If this was the
Mhm.
NBA, he'd, take the first few minutes of the second quarter and the fourth quarter and, let him cook a little bit, let him get his shots off if he wants to. Maybe that looks like for UNC when Elliott sits. Ian is the one who's on the ball a little bit more. He's initiating the offense. He's finding RJ or something like that. But his role will evolve as the year goes along. But I was just really impressed by him as well. Definitely was not afraid of the moment. And that's a great thing to see for UNC this early on in the season.
Yeah, and I think kind of seeing some of the comments, it's I think, like you said, that's kind of the role that I kind of have Ian as, especially right now, is kind of that spark off the bench as far as just scoring. Run some sort of sets where that's just the simple 5 out and pick and roll situations where he's able to come off and be aggressive from a scoring standpoint. I think there is a balance to, kind of the way that he plays. It's, okay, I'm going to go get a bucket. And I think at times that can be good for a team that's maybe struggling and needs a scoring punch. But at times, him kind of knowing where to be aggressive and when to try to go get his and things like that, I think that's going to take a little bit of time to um, for him to kind of get used to and see. I mean, coming out of high school, you're able to go try to score it anytime you have the ball, and a lot of times you have success in that. Um, and then in college, it's just a little bit different. You got guys that are, if not better than you, just as good as you. And then you've got other defensive schemes with bigs that are down low that are maybe bigger than you play. So I think that's just going to be kind of you know, uh, a maturing process. But I'm with you. I think Ian can be an unbelievable spark scoring wise, and I think Drake is going to be somebody that just affects the game in so many ways. Like we've talked about defensively, his athleticism, getting out in transition, and then if he hits shots, I think that's just kind of a cherry on top. So there's a bunch of guys on this, that show that they're, very capable in this game. I mean, you had a guy like Vin Allen who ended up fouling out, but he came in and gave some great minutes, backing up Jay Wash. Jay Wash had some stretches in there that showed some real physicality and some real aggression, which is kind of, nobody ever questions Jay Wash's skill set and ability to shoot and space the floor, but kind of seeing that from him, I think, was big. And then obviously the way the guards played were huge. So, it'll be interesting to see as the game goes on. At the end of the day, that was just game two, and we got plenty more minutes and plenty more games to kind of watch and see how things go.
Yeah, there was that fun moment with Jay Wash kind of beating his chest as he was running down the court. It was good to see that passion from him. I want to take a quick second to give a shout out to our sponsors for this episode. First, I want to talk about Johnny T-shirt. They are the best place for Tar Heel gear, a Chapel Hill tradition since 1983 and a 20-year partner of Inside Carolina. Visit them on Franklin Street or check out their online store for all of your UNC gear needs. And then also we want to shout out Congruity HR, the leading provider for Tar Heel business owners, payroll, HR, and employee benefits needs. Inside Carolina listeners can get a free payroll and HR assessment by emailing Matt@Congruity. We're going to take a quick second for the podcast listeners, a little ad break for you, and then we'll be back to talk more UNC basketball after the break. We are live here on a Monday night. It is just past the bottom of the hour here live on YouTube. Remember, the Shooting It Straight podcast is live every single Monday night this season, except for the game in Hawaii. We're drawing the line there. That would be about 2 a.m. So that one, we're going to take that one off. I think everyone understands. But every other Monday night throughout basketball season, be sure to tune in live on YouTube to talk some UNC hoops with us. We're going to get to some of your questions next. So appreciate all of the 70 viewers who are live here with us tonight. Also, thanks to all of you who are letting us know where you're watching from. 828 Lawson checking in from Hickory. We had some Alabama. We had some, Brian Jarman from Jacksonville, NC. A couple other shout outs there. So appreciate everyone for watching. I'm going to bring up this question, Justin, from Tony Dowd. I think it's a good one. It's something we haven't talked about yet, but it was definitely a big storyline coming out of Friday's game. Tony Dowd asks, were you surprised at UNC's rebounding against Kansas? UNC was very competitive on the boards. Not a lot of people were expecting North Carolina to go out and get 40 rebounds against Kansas, but they really fought hard on the glass, 10 offensive rebounds. Justin, what did you see there on the glass?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of what we talked about. I think it was last episode talking about how it's kind of it's going to be a team effort. A lot of times people call it gang rebounding, and that's kind of what you saw. I mean, obviously Jay Witt had 9, him and Jay Wash had 9, but then you look, it's 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 2. Like you said, 10 offensive rebounds. That's also big in a game where you're kind of struggling. Just getting more offensive possessions is going to be big, but it's a team effort. We don't have a guy like Armando down there swallowing up rebounds every single time down the floor. You've got some bigs that will probably have the majority of them, but then the guards have to get in there, and a lot of long rebounds are all for the guards, and also getting in there with the bigs a little bit and mixing it up is going to be key. And that's one of the things that might not be talked about a lot, but that's impressive going against a team that, not only was it Hunter Dickinson, they had the backup big that was a crazy athlete, freshman, that was all over the rim, plus KJ Adams, who is known to be kind of that, workhorse type of guy, whether it's getting on the offensive glass or getting on the defensive glass, getting extra opportunities. And I think KJ Adams only had 2 rebounds total. So, obviously, once again, another positive for this team to walk away from. It's one of the bigger teams that you'll play this year, and you were able to out-rebound them. Hopefully they can continue that. And, like I said, it's the second game of the season, but it's a good start. So we'll see if it continues.
Absolutely. I liked the tenacity that UNC attacked the offensive glass with, specifically on putback dunks. There was one fast break where Jalen Washington was absolutely booking it down the floor, and it led to a putback dunk. That's all heart. That's all effort. You have a decision to make when you're on the court. You can either run up there and try to put the ball back and dunk, or you can kind of, hang out and get ready to get back on defense. And I think that's, again, the influence of Hubert Davis as a coach, coaching that effort, coaching that energy out of his players. I think that's something that UNC fans should be very excited to see. It just feels like a Hubert Davis team in so many ways. His passion on the sidelines, his passion as a player, it just seems to be infused into every single player on this roster, Justin.
Yeah, I mean, it's the players are definitely going to take, follow the lead, and that's the energy, and you see it sometimes even in just his his press conferences, is whether it's post game, pre game, whatever it is. You just kind of see. I think the biggest thing is the love for North Carolina basketball that Coach Davis has, and so he just coaches with that. And all the players are going to follow suit. It was the same way with Coach Williams. I mean, his life was basically North Carolina basketball, and he coached with that passion, and it bled off onto us. And that's kind of what you're seeing. And I'm sure that halftime speech was a very spirited speech and kind of got them going a little bit. And they were able to settle in and kind of get it going. But um, I think it's definitely a testament to Coach Davis's energy and um, everything that he does for that team.
There's a great story on InsideCarolina.com about James Brown, the freshman center, getting a little vocal, getting a little rowdy in the locker room and talking to the guys. So that's great to see from the freshman. We haven't talked about him at all tonight, but he was out there in the first half and he did his best in that tough environment. This question is from Melinda Dolphin. What players have the most untapped potential to improve from where they are at in the Kansas game? There's a couple of options to choose from, Justin. There's one transfer that I'll let you talk about if you want to talk about him as an untapped potential guy, because he didn't get a lot of minutes in this first game. But yeah, when you look at this roster, who else has the potential to improve a ton?
Well, I mean, I think the most obvious is who you're talking about in Cade Tyson. Um, I mean, you basically the only time we saw him was a minute in there, and he unfortunately shot an air ball. And so I think that's probably the most obvious answer as far as just you can only go up from that minute of play as far as the quality. Um, but I mean, it's like I said, it's the second game of the season. We can overreact and say, "Oh man, Kate Tyson isn't ready," or "Man, that was other guys should play in front of him." We can overreact and say that, or we can give it at least 5 games and say, "Okay, you know what? Let's get a little bit bigger sample size than 1 minute." And see really if he's able to kind of find his groove, and if not, then let's look to somebody else to help. But I think for me, it's still the freshmen, I think, are kind of the untapped potential as far as where they fit on this team. Where does Ian Jackson really make his mark? Where does Drake really affect the game when he comes in and plays? I think those two guys that's going to be the most interesting to see the maturity process of them as the season goes on. And experiences like this as a freshman are going to be really, really big. I mean, your first away game is in Allen Fieldhouse against the number 1 team. I mean, you can't get much crazier, much big time than that. So I'm really looking forward to. That's probably one of my biggest things I'm looking forward to is just kind of seeing how they continue to grow, continue to figure out the college game, and just kind of take their games to even higher levels on the college level.
Totally agree about all of those points there. There were over 16,000 people. Oh, it looks like actually 15,000 people at the game on Friday in Allen Fieldhouse. Whereas Cade Tyson last season played his home games, according to a quick Google search, at the Curb Event Center with a capacity of 5,000. So this is a new environment. There are a lot of players who struggle in an environment like that one. Since you mentioned him a little bit, Justin, let's just briefly talk about Cade, but also, RJ. He hasn't had his fastest start ever to a season as a shooter. He's this season 4 of 18 from the 3-point line. You're someone who made a lot of baskets. You're a professional. Do you have any advice as a shooter for either Cade or RJ? Obviously, 2 completely different situations there. But from your outside vantage point, if you were maybe sitting on the bench as a coach or something like that, what would you be telling those guys?
Well, I think it'd be 2 totally separate situations. I think for Cade, we talk about it. There's a lot that goes into shooting. It's just not shooting, right? It's just not, hey, I go from high school to all of a sudden I'm playing in a 16,000 seat arena and I just shoot the ball the same exact way. I think that takes time, like we have talked about multiple times. It takes time to kind of get used to. It takes time to kind of feel the rhythm of shooting in an arena like that. And plus, you throw on there that you're playing in an opposing arena that holds that much. Um, that's a tough start, right? And I don't think that that one shot that he shot is an indicator of what kind of shooter he is. I think it's just it's different. And as much as we don't want to admit it as shooters, it is different. And it takes time sometimes for guys to kind of, figure it all out. But if I were talking to Kate, I would just say, hey, man, just calm down, do the same mechanics that you've always done, shoot the shots the same way. Yeah, the speed might be a little bit different, but when you get an open look, shoot it confidently. And if you don't, he's shown that he's able to kind of play off the bounce at times and play off closeouts. So just play basketball and try to play as free as possible. I think sometimes you can get so uptight, especially now coming off a game like this. I think it's going to be big for him just to try to go out there and just play basketball and just shoot the ball whenever he's open and make plays. If not, now for RJ is a totally different conversation. When I see kind of how RJ is starting, it reminds me a lot about me whenever my junior year, when it was like a week or two before they announced ACC Player of the Year. I put so much pressure on myself to go win the ACC Player of the Year and accomplish those things that I wasn't able to go out there and just play freely, right? Like I was so focused on I got to prove that I'm this guy. I got to prove that I deserve this. I got to prove that and this. And I think with RJ, he had a historic year last year in the numbers that he put up, the records that he broke, things like that. First team All American, ACC Player of the Year. Now you come in this year, you come back, and you've got those same that same pressure, the same hype behind your name, just in preseason. So your preseason first team All American, your preseason ACC Player of the Year, and a lot of times it kind of becomes to where if you don't have the same season that you had the year before, then it's a failure, right? I talked about this a little bit on the post game. And so you begin to kind of put a lot more pressure on yourself to prove that you are this particular player and that you deserve these rewards and accolades and things like that. And it can just kind of bog you down a little bit. And I think that's kind of what you're seeing with RJ. There were some shots that he shot in the Kansas game that, it looked like he rushed them because he felt like he had to hurry up and get a shot off. There were some shots that, he would shoot it and just kind of his body language afterwards, it was just kind of like disappointment. So if I was sitting there talking to RJ, I would tell him, hey, man, just be RJ. Like, don't think about all this extra stuff. Don't think about the preseason awards. Don't think about what people are saying you have to be for this team. Just be RJ. Be the RJ Davis that did what he did last year, right? Like last year, RJ really didn't have a ton of hype going into the season because it was all about Armando. And so he was able to go out there and just play freely. And we see what kind of numbers he was able to put up. And so I think for him, it's just a matter of kind of getting back and just relaxing, calming down, being RJ Davis, being the guy that's able to score whenever he wants to. And I think that's kind of the conversation that RJ needs to have is just don't put extra pressure on yourself. It's already going to come because of who you are, what you've already accomplished, what the team can accomplish. So just go out there and play free and have fun. That's probably the biggest thing for RJ.
North Carolina's next game on the schedule is Friday, November 15th at 8 o'clock in the Smith Center. The episode title for this one, First Test Complete. So we talked all about a very challenging test that UNC had to pass against a good Kansas team. American will not be as difficult of a challenge. That'll be a good opportunity for UNC before the road trip out to Hawaii. So there was a question about this in the chat. So I'll do a real quick rundown of the schedule. So UNC plays Hawaii. It begins at 7:30 p.m. Hawaiian time in Honolulu on Friday evening, November 22nd, which is obviously 12:30 in the morning, Saturday morning. So that's a super late game. And then there's a game against Dayton Monday, November 25th at 11:30 p.m. So a lot of late starts for Tar Heel fans. I'm expecting Sean Crowley, since you're here every single night, I'm expecting you to be here in the chat for the post-game show at 4 a.m. You might be the only one here, but we appreciate Sean and all of our listeners for showing up every single episode. A lot of really good basketball talk tonight. Happy to break down the game with everyone here in the chat and with Justin. I will give you the final word tonight. Any final thoughts, reflections about this game? Anything that you are looking for in Friday's game as a little bit of a preview, what you're expecting from the Tar Heels, and just get us out of here tonight as we wrap up our episode.
Yeah. Once again, it's a lot of positives that you can take away from this game. A lot of things that you can go back and look at film on, and just little things that they could have changed probably to start the game off, and then just some of the adjustments I think were really big going into the second half. So I hope that the guys hold their heads up, move on to this next game. You had mentioned that American won't be as tough, but I think it's important for these guys. One thing I'm watching is kind of the start of how they start this next game. Can they come out and bring the intensity and the effort that they had in that second half against Kansas, even against a team that's maybe less talented? Can they do that, and can they kind of sustain that throughout the game? And then it'll be big to kind of see some of those guys that we talk about, like a Cade Tyson, like an Ian and a Drake, kind of. This is a game too where they can kind of get a rhythm maybe and get into a flow, maybe play a little bit more and feel the game out a little bit more than maybe they were able to feel it out in Kansas. So super excited once again for just North Carolina basketball being back and being able to come on here and talk a little bit. Obviously, thank you for all the fans that come in here every Monday. Sean, we always talk about Sean, but there's a bunch of people that come into the chat and listen to us talk a little bit. So super excited as this week gets started, and these games kind of start, and then going into the games in Hawaii. So should be a lot of fun. Hope everybody's has a unbelievable week, and can kind of enjoy time with family and friends and watch some good UNC basketball.